Hi everyone, welcome to Show Studio. I'm Sophie Herman, and on today's panel, we're going to discuss the impact of social media on the fashion industry. And who could be better to discuss this with than our expert panelists here? Thank you all for zooming in. Hi guys, you look fabulous. Hi.
Hello.
So, before we start, I'll let them introduce themselves. And Caroline, why don't we start with you?
So, hi, I'm Caroline Dong. I'm the CEO and founder of Zine, an influencer marketing platform. We run software for influencer marketing, but we also have an in-house agency to run influencer campaigns around fashion, luxury goods, food, travel, everything. So we know pretty well the space around influencers and fashion.
Shall I go next?
Sure.
Oh, sorry. I always do this. I always overtalk everyone on a Zoom. Do you know what? So I'll just quickly introduce myself. I'm Stacey Duguid. I'm the fashion editorial director of Harrods. I oversee all the fashion shoots at Harrods across our channels, various channels.com, social and print. I've worked in the fashion industry for 20 years. I started going to the shows when there were absolutely no photographers standing outside. So this is a really interesting conversation for me. Over to you.
I'm Hannah, this is Steven, and we're from Fecal Matter. We're fashion designers, but we also do DJing, and we create a lot of content on Instagram too.
Hi, I am Violante. I am the founder and creative director of my namesake brand, Violante Nessi. And our mission is to celebrate modern day elegance, remastering classics for today's women. And we do everything rigorously in Italy. And I'm very happy to be part of this panel because social media is, our brand was born doing, through the social media. So I'm very excited to listen to your opinion, to share my experience.
Thank you so much for introducing yourselves and welcome. I honestly think this is one of the best looking panels I've ever seen. So thank you for joining. Okay, so let's start. So the mood has shifted, obviously, in this crazy year. No parties, no travel, no fun, basically. What does this mean for street style and influencers?
I'm going to make a start again. So from what I've seen across all influencers, I think generally the interest of the public has changed as well. Like, I can't travel. I don't want to see an influencer posting about travel. It's a bit of a teaser. Like, why would I want that? So everyone's interest has changed, and therefore influencers, I think, found it very easy to adapt their content in the same way, just posting about the things that everyone was doing, like banana bread, home workouts, cooking, being healthy, mental health, and so on. I think that most of them adapted very well and kind of like got a bit creative on how they could adapt their content to the new times.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I felt that something had to change. It was like that sort of the standing outside the shows and that kind of street style influence just felt broken to me because, years ago when I started going to the shows, I love street style because it was the little details that you could pick up, the interesting styling. And then everything just became kind of mono brand and I felt like of course, because it's a huge advertising vehicle for brands, the day of the show, everyone's wearing that brand. What I've loved about this period is that actually people have got really, really creative, as you said. They've reflected the times that we live in. And rather than it being a broadcast, I felt like it was a communication that invited me into their world.
Yeah, like something like almost behind the feed, like what they would usually post. Everyone was confined to be just themselves, right?
Exactly.
I think there's also a lot of, like pressure to kind of like sustain your brand during the beginning of the pandemic. I think everybody was really confused. I mean, we were confused also because it was like kind of inappropriate to kind of like put a spotlight on yourself during that time, because I mean, obviously people were dying and there was so much fear, and I think that in a lot of ways influencers definitely had to like tone it back. But I do think now it's starting to like pick up again.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, and I think for street style, I mean, even on Vogue.com, like Vogue US, they were showing like street style still from the shows just happening at the moment in Paris and in Milan. And everyone was just like wearing their mask, but there was still like the industry people who were able to attend some of those live shows that were happening, and they were still reporting on the street style.
And I think that in a lot of ways,
I saw a couple of people actually.
You can go.
No, sorry. It's kind of arriving here a little bit delayed, so that's why I was like already leaning in. Sorry.
What I was just gonna say was that.
Go ahead.
I'll go first. What I was gonna say was that I do think that that pressure is not as much as in the beginning to kind of be selfless, I guess. And I think that people are now interested, clients, consumers, and followers and whatnot. I think that people are interested in kind of seeing the glamour side of fashion again in that way. I guess we all miss it somehow.
Yeah, escapism, right? I mean, social media has been such a democracy, it's a democratic space where, back in the day, it was like Diana Vreeland, you can never be too rich or too thin. It was such a kind of one-noted front row. It was white, it was privileged, and those were the people going to the shows. And I think what social media has brought to the table is a global platform for everyone to be part of it. And you're so right. I mean, during lockdown, at the very, very beginning, we were like, oh, what do we post? What do we post? What do we post? I think now what the recent set of shows have proven is we want fantasy, we want glamour, we want escapism. And that is what social media can bring to our screen, to our, even if we're in lockdown or we're feeling miserable, we can all sit and watch the shows. And I think that's why it's been such a brilliant season.
Yeah, I want to say something because I completely agree with that, and I think there has been a shift in terms of like care and focus, because I think there was a bubble of influencers and street style people. Like there were too many, and this situation helped like to keep the ones relevant, and because they're the ones that are most creative and they're more like actual engagement, because there were too many, and actually now. The ones that I still follow and that I think are still relevant are the ones that embrace the situation. And there is more focus as well on the product. So on the piece for the brand to tell the story, people, it's got deeper. And so this thing about like being able to show the shows to everyone, being so democratic, as I said, it's amazing. It's really special. And also, yeah, it's amazing to see glamour and stuff, but we cannot get it. So then I always struggle myself, like I don't want to do something, I don't want to say dream of something if I cannot do it. It's just a wish. It's never going to be a reality. So I'm happy I'm not happy at all about what happened because it affected everyone, but it's what it comes out good is just people care more about the actual soul and meaning of the things. Yeah,
I completely agree actually with you guys. I mean, I've seen also a lot of influencers being sent almost entire runway collections and then trying them on at home on TikTok on these with these fast-paced videos that we all do when they do that. I mean, that's a completely new way of seeing it, but I do enjoy all of these videos, even though I feel kind of pressured now to also make them myself. But
they're funny. They're really funny.
They're
and that's the thing. The way that some of the influencers have adapted. I'm sorry, I can't switch my email off in the background. The way that they've adapted is, the really creative influencers have shone. You know, they've really, and they've entertained us. They've engaged their own creativity. It's far more interesting than them catwalking up and down outside a show.
Yeah, there is one I love, Annie. It's like, oh gosh, she's so good at doing it.
That's exactly the one I was talking about.
Brilliant.
Seriously, she's the best. She's awesome.
Yeah, she's great. I mean, as you all just said, I mean, the creativity level of the individual influencer has just literally peaked. And also now we don't get this whole team anymore who actually assists us with all of these things. You kind of have to create it by yourself, which is actually quite cool, because you learn how to do a lot of things by yourself that you haven't learned before, apart from banana bread. So that's nice.
I've never baked banana bread ever. Has anyone else?
I'm very proud of you.
But
Mine was an utter fail.
I also think it's important to note that in my personal opinion, the adoption process of an influencer is very similar to that of a company, because influencers make money off of promoting these products. So of course, if you're in a time where it's inappropriate to show certain things or talk about certain subject matter because of a pandemic, for example, an influencer is of course going to adapt very fast to be able to make that coin at the end of the day, no matter if there's a pandemic or not, and they will find that way to do it. And of course, through that, we will find the amazing creativity, and they're gonna plaster this like it's for entertainment, it's to show beauty on top of it on a surface level. But I think underneath it all, I think it's all about the money at the end of the day for a lot of influencers.
I do agree with that, but also I do think that sort of if you broaden it out from just street style and those women attending the shows, social media provides niches for communities, real niche communities that were lost in kind of mainstream media.
Yeah.
And actually I find that more interesting than the kind of the general street style phenomenon that's happened. It's like these passions of community that you have a place, and they have a place for inspiration.
And it's also kind of like adapting mainstream brands and mainstream styles to a more niche audience as well. So you can find those small influencers that may be very niche, but get really creative with brands you wouldn't have thought would fit into that niche, for example.
Mm-hmm. I guess for us, in a lot of ways, it's ironic because like a lot of our fans and supporters, they do consider us as influencers, even though we're selling our own products and our own brand and our own designs, basically. But I think it's kind of confusing for us, specifically during the pandemic, like the beginning time frame. It was really confusing because it was like people are like obviously suffering around the world, and it's such a like time frame where I don't think that anybody was thinking about products and anybody wanted to be sold products, but it was interesting how influencers found a way to still integrate products into something that was personal and something that was supposed to be meaningful. And I guess what we're just trying to say, I think there is that pressure on influencers who are people. They're not like robots, they're people. And I think there's a lot of pressure because it's like their job is so tied into their lifestyle and who they are and what they do. But then at the end of the day, they also have to like somehow sell a product because that's they're working with a brand or they have their own brand or whatever. And I think that it was such a like weird time, I guess, to like see some people do it successfully and then some people doing it not successfully. And I totally understand we're kind of a part of like a niche community also. And in a lot of ways, I think that's the beauty of social media, is where you can connect with people. But then I think the dark side is when you connect with people in order to sell a product. And that kind of comes out a little bit shallow sometimes. And I don't know, there's just issues with that for us, but yeah.
That actually leads me to my next question. So with the Black Lives Matter movement earlier this year, many companies were called to account if their responses were lackluster or perceived as inauthentic, where I I'm not going to say anything yet how I think about this, but how do you think, how is that affecting how the brands see social media, and also what does it say about how customers are using social media?
I think social media it's a bit like being at a dinner party, right? You can't sit in silence. And if someone seated next to you starts talking about politics, what, do you just sit quietly and not say anything back? I mean, brands through Black Lives Matter have understood that there is a wider conversation around politics that they now have to engage with. And a conversation that represents their workforce, their customer. And I think it's been, no brands didn't know how to react that morning, not necessarily, but it has been such a learning curve for brands.
I think it's like a new challenge for brands, whereas before, like marketing and branding campaigns go over months and years, and there's so much detailed planning, and suddenly they wake up one morning and they have to put out a statement that day without having a team of 50 planning everything out in much detail. But so that's a challenge. On the other hand, it's an opportunity, right, to have like a real-time conversation with their consumers and with the public, and being very agile about their brand perception and their brand profile.
I think that a lot of brands, I think Black people are not a priority as much as you would think it would be. And I think that that's just something that whole situation really kind of like put everyone with a magnifying glass to kind of like see where brands stand, because it's one thing to make a statement, but it was like everybody was looking at each brand actually like their history. It was something where it was like, I think a lot of brands thought, oh, I could just like put a statement or apology, but then for some of them it really backfired because it was like contradictory to what they were actually doing every day before the movement kind of became so important to society. But I mean, I think there's a lot of positives, because I think that it kind of, if anything, kind of showed an opportunity for a lot of brands to kind of, I guess, learn and kind of understand how they can interact with kind of the movement in a positive way, rather than just like putting out a statement. Because I saw a lot of brands, they were like, I don't know, like selling a t-shirt that goes to, I don't know, a Black company or something, like a charity or something. I think that's still positive, because at least they were making initiatives rather than just apologies on Instagram. Because I think that at least for us, for so many of our, supporters and our fans, like, which is majoritively like people of color who are non-binary. And I think it was just like, I'm sure a lot of our fans are actually the people commenting on those posts, like saying that, whether a brand is not doing it right or not. So I think that in a lot of ways we got to see kind of like where they were coming from. And I think that in a lot of ways, I think people were just, I don't know, they were disappointed in kind of some of the brands, at least, how they responded to the situation.
Yeah, I think that some brands really got agreements, but from my side, for my brand, I always, for me, there's like, in my family, we come from South America, and my mom has always been discriminated because she's quite dark, and my dad is German, so they always thought like really bad of her and stuff. And it's to me, this really, because it's really sad as a thing, and for brands acknowledge that this unfortunately is still something relevant and that nobody talks about. It's been great to see, like, okay, now we know this is a presa di coscienza, I don't know in English, but it's like, you really, okay, there's something which is affecting many people in this world, and it's like, it's so, I don't know, I thought it was like very delicate, so I didn't want to say anything, because I share as much as I could, like that is really like a big issue that shouldn't be an issue. And but I didn't want to say something more, and like we could have been forced and stuff, because I think like, I don't know, when you say that there is a problem, where actually it shouldn't be a problem, you're just highlighting it. So I really think that the big brands, it was it's extraordinary what they did with this. Like, I really respect everyone that really embraced what that meant.
I think it proved to brands that they needed to use find their authentic voice. Yeah. It was about approaching that as that whole outpouring as, you know, we need to find our authentic voice and we need to stand behind this. And, you know, even on a personal level, so forget brand level, on a personal level, the conversations that we were having amongst one another and the conversations I was having with my children about racism, the conversations I felt that I should have been having many years before, actually. And it was a real awakening for me personally. And from a brand perspective, as I say, you know, I do think it's changed. I hope that it's changed the culture within brands.
I think that they should change in education, because we grow up thinking, like, in history classes, I think like philosophy should come first before you can choose to study history. Of course, you're gonna study history, but I think philosophy, like, values, doing a subject in schools and education that really gives you the opportunity to interpret in a good way, because kids grow up with, like, in history, that the slavery and stuff, and of course you, like, in your mind, you don't think further. So I always thought, like, since this happened, that it should really change the way you say things to kids, because in the subconscious is where, like, there are the issues, not in the consciousness, which is where we are now. So that's my point of view.
I think that also right now, I think the most important thing is to kind of see how those brands are working today and what their future plans are, because obviously, I mean, there's still a lot of protests, there's still a lot of spotlight on the movement. I think the movement is like far from being resolved in a lot of ways. I think there's so much more to be done. But I think what's interesting is kind of seeing how the brands are sustaining their initiatives and how they're doing it still today, and if they're still committed, because I think it's interesting seeing, like, some brands, like, you know, really go forward with it when it was, like, so heavy, and then kind of, like, faded into not really having it as a priority anymore. Whereas there's some brands where it's like, you know, at least with Vogue, like, what we've been seeing is, like, they're really making that effort, like, every day and even more. And it's really actually beautiful to see that there's so many Black voices that are being spotlighted that I don't think would ever before. And I feel, at least from an outsider looking, I think that I do see a lot of authenticity with the initiatives that a lot of the brands are doing. And I think that that's, if anything, like, just such an amazing thing that came out of this whole situation that was really dark. But I think that there's a lot of light that came out from that. And I think that there's a lot of hope, at least for us, like, really young people doing our own thing. And, like, I'm a person of color, all that. Like, I think that I see a lot of hope, at least. And I'm very optimistic that I think things will continue to get better. So.
Me too. I also think, as you said, this whole thing is far from over, thank God, and the conversation has just begun to start being had. So, which is obvious. I think the global conversation in total is actually the most important thing, because this is where education starts and where brands start looking at themselves, as you said, as on their own history, and how can, you know, you can't change history, but you can actually change the future. So that's, I think, is the most important thing we can take from this. But yeah. Does anyone else did you think of any brands in particular that have dealt particularly well with this, or have changed into a better direction?
I think that the brands that did it the best are the brands that were already funded and owned by Black people, though it was their own brand. I think that they were the ones that actually did I think they're the ones who, like, what they did was way more important than what anyone else did, that because I think that it was a time for them to kind of like step up and kind of take the power that they deserve. And I think so many of them has really done so many amazing things. And I think that that's something that, at least for us, those were the brands that really impress us, because I think that there's so much pressure to be, I don't know, like a Black owned brand and like have this entire subject matter happen and so much spotlight on some of these brands where they were like, you know, having all these articles and stuff, like featured articles where it's like, I'm sure it must have been so difficult in terms of like, just like a split second have so much spotlight on them. But I think a lot of them did amazing.
Yeah, I completely agree on what you said, because for example, I asked a girlfriend of mine, and she's from Nigeria, and I asked her, she's a model but also an activist, and she's amazing. She did a TED talk about the conflicts inside the countries in Africa, and she told me that she refused to work because she felt like used. She didn't want to feel used, you know, by the whole situation, because it was easy for brands then to pick like Black models. And she said, I don't want to do that. I feel insulted because now you're thinking of me. Now you're thinking that I'm dark and I should be on your campaign. And that's, I mean, she told me this, and I said, you're 100% right. And that's why I don't do that now, because it's not like how organic it should be. It's just not a trend, this thing.
No, I totally agree with you. And I think that, I mean, I've always, you know, I've taken pride in casting very diverse models across all of our shoots at Harrods. But what I then started to look at, which it made me question, was like the creative team. So the photographers, the hair and makeup artists, like the whole team. And actually that shone a light for me on the white gaze. And just shot Ajak Dang, and I used a Black photographer. And that sounds, you know, really obvious. And it should be really obvious, but this is the kind of change we're talking about. It's not, like you say, it's not a tokenistic moment. It's not just go, oh yeah, we use, you know, non-white people. It's looking at the teams and the structures, our boardrooms, from, you know, from senior management that is representative of the world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, generally, I think it's important to make sure that in your entire hiring process and who you look at, you make sure that your opportunities are reached by the right people as well, because often you put something into a pool where you know you're only going to get very uniform applications from the same kind of like cast or typecast.
Yes.
You need to make sure that you actually reach the right audience, and they're spread out to different, you know, universities, recruiters and everything. It's not as easy, and it's not as it does take some conscious effort, I feel, which is a shame, but it's true.
It's certainly true of the entire fashion industry, because it's very one-noted in its privilege.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not saying that but it's very difficult to get into fashion. You know, you start as an intern and you earn no money. So who actually? So it becomes an issue of, okay, there's race, but there's also socioeconomics. If you're a working class kid and you can't even afford to get to art school, but you're deeply talented, you know, we're talking about issues that go. It starts with education.
It's structural issues that hold people back rather than their own talent.
Mm-hmm. I think that the beauty of social media is that at least it offers an alternative path for a lot of creatives to kind of present their work and interact with fashion, because I mean, we work with a lot of people in the industry, but at the same time, we also do things that are totally away from that. And yet it's still fashion, yet it's still, you know, us presenting collections or doing projects or clothing or whatever. But I think that the beauty, at least for a person of color, and me and Hannah, for example, we're from Montreal, Canada, like we had no access to like real fashion and the real industry unless we went to New York, which we would go sometimes. But in the beginning, it was like really hard because it was like our designs, our look, our perspective, our message. It was like not necessarily understood by our community initially. And that was difficult because we were like, worried, like, how are we going to sell? Like, how are we going to survive? Like, we're, you know, living off of our designs. How are we going to do this? And it was really through social media and being able to tap into, I guess, a more worldwide audience and a more global audience that we were able to, I guess, survive basically. And I think for a lot of, you know, the outsiders or the people that can't get into the fashion industry because of privilege or whatever, I think that there's at least social media where they can, like, you know, kind of participate in it somehow. But then there is also, I mean, we've always dealt with this, and I think that it's interesting actually that Dior and all those brands are like working with TikTok and working with those platforms, because there's sometimes a little bit of like the feeling that if you're doing something that isn't a part of the actual structure of the fashion industry, what you're doing is not valid, and it's not like necessarily considered professional or whatever. And for so long, social media was like, you know, we would tell people, oh yeah, we're launching our collection on Instagram, or we're launching our collection on, you know, something on social media. It would be like, oh, well, why don't you do something in real life? Why don't you, like, you know, do something during fashion week? And like, it was always like, oh, but we want to do something different. But it's interesting how now that's like the norm to do something on social media because of the pandemic, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting actually, even for me, because also it's interesting. I mean, it's the way because the fashion system is dictated from the collection seasons and stuff. And I've never done collections. I always do product drops, or like as you. So it's like, or like very consistent stories with new pieces. So everything needs to has a meaning. And it's true that through COVID, through this terrible situation, people realize that actually what new brands are doing, that are niche brands that they don't do in between. For example, I think I really am devoted to Instagram because I couldn't have started my business, but at the same time, my business model is direct to consumer. So I value personal relationships so much. We have always had like one-to-one appointments at our townhouse with clients. And so the thing that people built through Instagram, and now it's a one-to-one thing, for me was normality. Sustainability has always been normal. Prioritize human sustainability above even like, yes, I do organic pieces and stuff, but like people is what really matters, and the people are being affected the most. So I am glad that I take out the positive, is that they're really understanding that there was an issue in the system. And it's sad that you needed like a terrible situation to realize these things. And it is exciting for me to meet brands that they find their own way to, you know, communicate their values and stuff, because it's not easy when you have so much competition. And but it's great. Keeping it niche is like it's everything, because you keep it authentic and you get your audience. Because at the beginning I was speaking to the wrong audience, like you, that you couldn't find it yourself, like the good response to your designs. But it's not that you're wrong, it's actually the audience. So it's interesting.
Did you find during, we're still on this diversity, Black Lives Matter question, but did you find during, in that kind of aftermath of those first few days, did you find yourself following on social media new people, sort of less in your echo chamber? I felt like Instagram was serving me up people who were like me, and because I had followed the same people over and over again, and then yet on my feed there was this kind of cross-pollination of a more diverse set of people going, actually follow this person, follow this person, follow this person, sort of way. Whereas my social media had become like really small in a way, even though, you know, it's like picking up your favorite people every single day, and then suddenly the floodgates opened. And I was able to discover like new people.
Totally. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's ironic because you would think that we would have like the most diverse people to follow, and like the people that, you know what I mean, you would think that, you know, are totally unique. But even us, it was like, you know, obviously social media is still so much based on like an algorithm, and it's so based on kind of data. And, you know, even for us, we were discovering new people, even just like, ironically, like going on, I don't know, someone like Kylie Jenner's Instagram and seeing her share like Black designers or Black voices or Black initiatives, like that would never happen if it wasn't, you know what I mean? And so her audience probably discovered so many people, and we discovered so many people. So I think that if anything, that was a great positive that came from the whole situation.
Yeah.
I think everyone's horizon just got so much more opened. And I mean, I just watched The Social Dilemma, so I completely agree. My Instagram,
terrifying.
It was so boring. And even though I follow about 3,500 things and brands and people and artists, it's always kind of, you always do get kind of dished out the same thing.
So dull.
Ugh, so dull. So I'm
not insulting the mums at school, but you know, my feed was like just the mums at school. I'm like, what? I follow 3,500 creatives and interesting industry insiders, and I'm just getting the mums at school. What? Yeah, but it's true, isn't it?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
These are just so fed to us.
Absolutely. Well, as you just mentioned, Stephen, before, let's talk about another thing that we're being fed now, which are new platforms like TikTok and Twitch, where Prada, Louis Vuitton, Burberry, Dior, they all chose to stream their shows over new platform. Especially Burberry chose Twitch, which I didn't even know what that was, because it's a gaming platform. Caroline obviously knows, because she's a big old gamer over here, but she actually had to explain me what the hell was happening. So with them streaming it through these venues, what do you think where these brands think their audience is, and who are they aiming it for, and why?
Well, I think for TikTok, it's definitely a younger audience, right? And it's about having that presence online that you would have if you have a flagship store on the high street. Like a flagship store on the high street makes you present to anyone walking past, regardless of their age, gender, or whether there might be a potential customer or not. But it just gives you that presence and people knowing about your brand. And as you go online, it's very easy to just be channeled into, you know, as you said, as Instagram serves the same content or similar content to its users, to be channeled into one category of people and not reaching potentially the next customer, which is always a big thing for brands, and also a younger audience that one day might aspire to be a customer of yours. So it's important for them to kind of like start pushing their content on those channels, understanding how it works, how they can engage an audience on there to stay relevant. No.
Can I ask, what do you think that audience thought when they saw the Burberry show
on Twitch?
They're used to like playing Fortnite, or watching Fortnite rather, and then suddenly on Twitch, like you've got the Burberry show. I mean, I think that this is obviously it's an expansion where they're looking to expand their audience in the next generation, and that's completely understandable. But I can't help thinking, and this is not just Burberry, but just generally, that each platform requires its own creative solution.
Yeah.
And perhaps streamlining stuff, what does that mean to people?
I mean, I don't know, but isn't it almost like discriminating to say that someone who plays video games is not interested in Burberry? Because I play video games and I actually am very interested. So it's almost, you know, like it's very easy to stereotype and to categorize that way. But and I think like testing the waters with something like that and to see what's coming out of it.
I agree. I mean, they had 42,000 views on that live stream, but I'm just suggesting perhaps that there is a different creative solution per platform. What does it
Possibly, yeah. I mean, a Burberry themed kind of like video game special download, that would be fantastic.
That would be pretty
cool. Exactly, it would be really cool.
I just feel like if I totally agree with you, Stacey. Like I feel if these brands are really going to integrate themselves into social media, no matter what the platform is, I do feel like they need to create different type of content for different type of, like, TikTok is so different, like how it operates and how it is successful, because of course you can upload anything you want, but is it really gonna be successful and stay in those people's minds, of those users? And to me, like a show like the Prada show on TikTok, like I don't necessarily see how that is effective for the TikTok user.
Especially since, like, I think we're all kind of trained by now to, like, if we want to see a show, it's either through YouTube or through actually like the website of whatever thing they're, like a live stream or whatever. But I think that it's like, what's interesting, I would say, is like, if the pandemic obviously continues to like ban live shows and stuff like that, it's interesting to see next seasons, like how they're going to integrate themselves, because I think that this was obviously like a tester time frame. Everybody was experimenting, and I think that in a lot of ways, I mean, even for us, it's like, for example, like we're not on TikTok because we know that like that it doesn't really serve us what we want for our type of engagement, because like a big part of TikTok is entertaining, and it's like really fun, and it's like kind of disposable right now, at least in terms of the content that you can give out. Whereas like, it's like not, TikTok is not the place to like start, I don't know, talking about like something super deep and like trying to connect with people. Like that's more Instagram right now.
Very intellectual fashion. Like I don't think it's.
I think that if anything, what's interesting is to see if those brands worked with the influencers that they are collaborating with and see how they use TikTok with their clothing and their collections. I think that's interesting. As for Twitch, I think that that's something that's like, I think it's like cool, because there's like I know a lot of musicians, like they'll release their music video on like Twitch, or they'll like release stuff on like alternative apps that are not just Instagram or YouTube. But I think what Stacey said is like totally accurate. I think that there needs to be a little bit more of like different types of initiatives for each app, because they're so different. Each app are so different. I don't know.
I think that brands are totally rethinking their digital strategies because it's also new. And I think you're absolutely right. You know, it was a toe in the water this season. Let's see how it goes. I think it's I think it's interesting, but I do think it's an evolution. And you're right, I think next season, let's see what happens. Do you think, big question, do you think, so imagine there's a vaccination, COVID is moved along, do you think fashion will ever return to the fashion show circuit as we once knew it?
No, definitely not. I don't think it will be. There will always be an element of more digital presence and also more consciousness around it.
I think the fashion circus, I mean, I think a big part of it was kind of feeding this like desire to be a part of something that you're not a part of. And like, you know, we all knew that like the whole front row thing, the whole like security guard, like, and I'm sure we've all kind of been at shows and we know kind of how it works. And it's an experience that sometimes I'm sure like you can feel kind of lucky to be invited, or you can feel kind of like, oh, I wish I was invited. And that's something that in a lot of ways, I think that that's the goal of the circus in some ways, because it's like, we were talking about this last night and we were like Hannah's mom really likes Burberry, but it's like, does she watch the shows? Like, is she even aware of the collection?
Yeah, like why? I don't think my mom wants the Burberry scarf because of the show and that she wasn't invited. Like,
but if she saw a photo of Nicole Kidman on a magazine or something at the show, that might be more interesting to her than the show itself.
And to me is like, is the show just for the fashion elite? Is it just for the fashion community to feel that sense of power and elitism with the whole show thing? So,
but also to connect with one another, because it's like, it's an industry, it's like a community, and it's like a place that, you know, models get to meet other model friends, and like, you know, it's like a whole world. But at the end of the day, it's like interesting to see, like, I guess another question is like, the people who go to the shows, like, are they, like, is their work right now seeing it just through digital? Is it actually, are they like, is it still working for them?
I can tell you that the buying process, I'm not a buyer, but the merchants, like they are doing everything mostly digitally. Our fashion directors in Paris in market, and that when you're not physically near the clothes, you can't get it. And also, this is the other thing I was thinking about this morning, was actually, you know, normally when I'm at the shows, I spend a month at the shows, and I come away and I know like the trends, the zeitgeist, how fashion reflects culture and politics and bigger conversation pieces that can affect campaigns in the store or whatever it is, features. And this season I've come away with sound bites. So I love the Dries Van Noten show. He described it as almost like making an ad campaign. And he had never had the opportunity to do that because he was always so kind of into creating the catwalk show, the live experience. And I love these anecdotes. Have I come away with an overarching message? Not really, because I'm not there. But maybe if I dissect into it a bit more,
I think
spend more time.
There's definitely, I mean, there's people that have to go to these shows, and there's definitely a need to be present there. But there's also a lot of people going that don't have to be there, and they're just going for the prestige. And I think it came back to what was at the beginning of the lockdown, is actually we should travel less. We should be more kind to nature. We shouldn't do unnecessary trips forth and back and across Europe just for a few pictures or something like that. And I think that is something that might, well, hopefully, will stay in people's minds a little bit.
I think there's not really a change, but an evolution, because as you said, people need to touch the collection, see the seasons, and also these tools, social media, reach, whatever. As long as the brand is like aligned with their DNA and the values, they can do whatever they want. But if it doesn't suit a brand, I agree with Burberry. Like it's not really, and it's amazing. And yeah, it's a test, it's a splash, and I consider this application and stuff like they're the future. We need to embrace it. But yeah, I'm not a TikToker either. Like but I love watch reels. But like it needs to suit you. It needs to feel. It's not. It's like it's a waste because it's not what you really believe in. And yeah,
the Dries show is on our.
Oh, is it? Oh. Amazing. I love how every brand had their own individual takes of their bespoke, of their showing their collections in different ways. Like if it's the Chanel short film now, or I actually loved Jeremy Scott's Moschino, the little, how do you call them? The puppet show? Yes, exactly. Thank you.
So I got this. Like this is a invitation.
Wow.
This arrived last night with a bunch of flowers. So what I find interesting is like there's the Mimi films and then the show, but there's the designers are still doing
cool
invitation. It was so funny, you know, the kind of
the Paco Rabanne had the mask, and everyone had something special.
But I'm here in London, and I'm not in Paris. I'm not at the show. I'm not anywhere.
Yeah,
but it's just on Mimi.com, 2:00, October the 6th. But I get a physical invitation for it.
That's great.
Well, I think that's what's interesting is that I think physical things are still super effective and so important. And I think that there's still that need to see something physical, because what we're consuming as clients is a physical product. It's not like, I think a lot of people, they buy into the brand and like the philosophy and the image, but at the end of the day, you have to go to a store and buy it or order it online or whatever, but it's still a physical thing. At the end of the day. And I think that that's a big part of fashion. And I think it's kind of like, I think it's impossible to eliminate that need for something physical in some way.
I agree. Well, and with the pandemic preventing in-person events right now to drum up the hype and excitement all around a new collection, like, is social media more important than ever to make a splash?
I mean, we were talking about this yesterday, and like, I mean, for us initially, that was like, usually, I mean, social media is our main platform that we use in our own brand and what we do. And it's always kind of like altering whatever we're doing sometimes to fit into social media. So it's like, I'm not going to like sometimes when we shoot an Instagram post, it's like, I'm not going to shoot it with like a high quality camera every time because it's going to get compressed. So I like naturally just think that, you know what I mean? I just use the phone or whatever. But I think that with this specific situation, I think that a lot of people are definitely altering their work to fit into social media. And I think there is that craving, I guess, to like create something that's viral somehow. And like the Moschino show, for example, like that was obviously something that was like going to be talked about because it was like something different, it was something unique, and it was a different approach at a fashion show. And that was everywhere. Like we saw that everywhere. And it even reached people outside of the fashion industry. And I think that that's something that is kind of perhaps interesting, and because people are focused on, I guess, connecting what their work and what they're doing with social media, they're maybe thinking about a wider audience than just the fashion community. So I don't know.
That show was amazing. And then also I loved the fact that Hamish was then sent.
I know, I'm just looking at Hamish next to Anna Wintour in the
his puppet maquette, however you describe it. And oh gosh, children. Someone might have to mute me. And then he's got his little doll next to him on the sofa, and he posts it on Instagram, and it was such an amazing, amazing show. Show Studio might have to mute me because my children have just come home from school. No, they're being very quiet. Carry on.
Just 8 more minutes, kids. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. Well, I mean, as we're still talking about the shows, obviously, and social media, do you think social media can actually now be used as kind of a news channel to announce big fashion industry news? For example, the closure of Love magazine, or Matthew Williams' new Givenchy collection. And then there's Diet Prada roasting the entire fashion industry every week. How does this, do you think, affect news publications in general?
And I think effort to do things, and just having everything so available, it loses the value and everything. Everything is, I mean, I understand, and I mean, I follow all the news, fashion news on social media, but at the same time, it's like, where is the pleasure of like knowing something so special? I don't know. I miss making an effort, because people is gonna get just so lazy with social media, and we're getting so lazy. And if the effort is to click on another channel, it's like I don't know. It's crazy in my head, and you know, it's I don't like this. I love social media, but at the same time, for some certain things that are really special, I will keep it on a different space. But then, yes, they should say something, but not everything on social media. They just could put titles, you know, invite people to go on their platforms. If not, you also people, they're not going to work anymore. It's just going to be everyone on Instagram working there.
I mean, what I find funny about it is that I worked at Elle magazine for 12 years, and I still write for newspapers, and we have to fact check everything. Mm-hmm. Can't just put anything out. So Instagram is an amazing, social media is an amazing way of spreading gossip. And it's not actually checked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that it's like so much, I think it's positive because it's instant, so you get to have this like instant kind of idea of what's happening in the industry without having to like put a lot of effort in like clicking on a website, reading a full article. You could just read a little like caption and like get the gist. But at the same time, I think the biggest problem is there's not a lot of accuracy. I think there's a lot of different narratives on a subject matter that should be factual. And I think that because Instagram is all about opinions, it's all about the personal experience and their perspective. And I think that sometimes it works because, like, you know, example with the Me Too movement and like all of these movements where it was like about calling out things that were, you know, destructive and bad, but in a positive way, because you like, when would you ever get to like read the story of someone that, you know, kind of doesn't really have a lot of power in the industry or whatever. And like, so it's interesting on that level, but on another level, it's like a lot of people just stop at those posts and they don't research further. And therefore their opinions are so built on one specific angle. And I think a lot of Instagram users, I think they use that angle and the need for drama to kind of like feed into their following and feed into getting more success. And I think the drama is just like a big part of why people post, is to create this type of like People magazine type of vibes. I don't know, it's like weird.
I think that Instagram is not a final destination, it's a tool, it's a medium to get to go on your website and buy your products, to go to get to know you, to go to get information, is a tool. Either you use it against yourself and you think that you're done, you're satisfied with that depth of, which is, there's no depth on Instagram unless, as you said, these personal experiences and like actual real life, which is amazing, and a way to show the values and stuff, but like, it's not everything. The life doesn't end on Instagram. Like information doesn't end on Instagram, because also Instagram, it's like you cannot go research more and more and more. You just stop people from doing it if you show everything. And it's like mystery is what keeps you attracted by things and by brands. What's next? What's gonna happen? What was behind the brand and stuff? You go research and whatever.
All of that would be compressed. I mean, for example, with the closure of Love magazine, I'm not sure how long their caption actually was announcing the closure, but it obviously kind of, it reduces the information that we actually wanted to know, or that someone should know about this whole history of the magazine, to a minimum. And it's actually about the, well, I don't want to say the death of print, but that's kind of what happened, I guess. And to announce that then on social media or on Instagram is kind of a contradicting thing in itself.
I just think social media just doesn't replace proper journalism. And, you know, I love Vanessa Friedman at the New York Times. Like, if you want an opinion, it's also subjective, and it's I mean, some people are amazing and you're like, oh yes, I've learned something. But actually then I think, you know, we need to take a step back and go, is this true? Do I believe it? Do I want to find out more? Where do I do that? And our news feeds, like we said, have become a kind of construct of opinion based on our Google search or algorithms. I think social media is really great for example, you know, the Bauman show and the Givenchy announcement. I think things like that do belong on social media, but we've got to be very careful in defining what is true and what is false, and what is gossip and what is hearsay and what is fact.
And I think a lot of
consumers.
I think a lot of people, they profit from the fact that, you know, Instagram is not necessarily a platform that people go into wanting to think super critically. Like, you know, a lot of us, we go on Instagram to either like check up on friends or introduce ourselves to like new aesthetic things or just like be entertained. But the fact that like now news is such a big part of it, also, it's kind of awkward in a lot of ways, because it's like you're going into it wanting to have fun, and then you're like seeing all these like call out posts on people, and then you're like liking and commenting, putting a heart and emoji, when it's like I find it kind of minimalizes whatever subject matter it's talking about, and it becomes something that is not as meaningful, where I don't know, it's a bit confusing.
It's exactly why I left Twitter and Facebook.
Oh, that's exactly why I just left Twitter as well. I just couldn't see a certain orange face anymore, and it was just it's insane. Anyway, but Stephen, you also said something important before. You said, for example, now during the pandemic, you didn't take the camera and all of the professional equipment on the streets or onto your shooting locations. You just shot it with the phone, and I think images and videos can be blurry and unpolished now, where it's the kind of the opposite of the sleek luxury, high luxury vibe. what does this say about the direction that fashion is going in?
Well, I think sorry.
Oh, you go, Caroline, you go.
I mean, we've been working with a number of luxury brands and everything, and they do pick their influencers based on the quality of their content. So there's still a hesitation to kind of like just let go of the branding and the brand feeling as a whole. So it's not as advanced that they just say like, right, we work with anyone regardless of what the content is like. There's a lot of thought around that an influencer needs to be on brand, but in the same way as a brand can't control who is wearing their products on the street, they can't control who tags them on Instagram or who promotes them on Instagram from an own accord. But overall, I think they were getting less scared of the thought that they can't control social media and that things might go viral, and it is just what it is, and it might be over within a week and might be a stressful week, but it's happening. So there's a shift how it's social, and brands letting go a little bit of that control feeling that they have.
I think a brand that works with social media really well is Balenciaga. I think that if you look at from what they're posting versus what type of content they're putting out there as a brand, it's like two different things sometimes, actually. For example, you'll see on their Instagram, it's like all photos shot with an iPhone. It's like, it's all just like normal photos from their models or whatever. And I think that is right for Instagram, because it's like, if you look at any brand posting lookbook photos on Instagram, it's like they post like 20 looks in like an hour, and like you look at the engagement and it's like really low, and like you barely get any comments. Whereas like someone like a brand like Balenciaga, it's like they don't post their lookbook photos usually, and you just kind of engage with what they're putting out there for Instagram. But then when you look on, I don't know, Vogue or YouTube or whatever, you'll see their short film for their show, and you'll see like high quality photography. And like, I think it's about kind of I think it's a lot of work, actually, because I think you have to really, as a brand, I think you have to create even more content, and you have to kind of separate it from what's for Instagram, what's for, an imprint magazine or whatever, and what's for, I think that it's about actually creating different gradients of your work and finding the way of balancing. I mean, for us, it's like so much of our work is on Instagram, and we put so much effort on some of our images. And like the idea that if ever somebody wants to make a book about our work or our imagery in the future, a lot of them are actually really low quality images, because it's like it's compressed, it's shot with an iPhone, and it's like to blow it up in like poster size wouldn't be possible, even though the content is like a lot of work and stuff. So it's like we've also had to start to kind of understand like kind of the durability of what we're doing and trying to navigate like that, because at the same time it's like we have to post almost 2 times a week, because it's like that's just Instagram. You have to like constantly post and constantly supply content because people lose engagement. So in a lot of ways it's like balancing creating something that's like fast and quick and easy, but not disposable and not high quality. So it's like a weird balance.
I think that I totally agree with you on I love less polished imagery for social. It's the engagement is better. I feel like sometimes high polished luxury isn't the reality. And what we do now when we're shooting, I have like 3 different layers like you described. So like you have your print, which is sort of beautiful and, well, not polished is the wrong word, but it's elevated and it's high end. And then I've got someone on an iPhone shooting the model behind the scenes, and then I've got someone else making the reels. Mm-hmm. So that one shoot does everything, and it goes across all the different platforms. I mean, reels, we haven't touched on reels actually, but we sort of have with the influencer piece earlier. But reels has become a really engaging way to show. I mean, we had Prada in our windows recently, and we have all these exclusive products at Harrods. And so we made a reels, and the brand loved it. It did really well on social media. So it's all just like sort of, and I think like an iPhone wouldn't have worked in that moment, like just an iPhone shoot. But I feel like, you know, when we do the behind the scenes, definitely when we do the behind the scenes on our iPhone, and it's the model, like, you know, doing a little smile off camera or whatever, they're so well engaged with, like people love it. And it's relatable, it's more relatable. I think maybe, you know, the world is shifting away from this highly polished imagery, and maybe highly polished imagery, elevated imagery belongs in coffee table books, in the style Bibles that come out autumn, winter, spring, summer. Maybe they live there, and social media is less considered.
Even though Vogue Italia always, like, this was always my favorite thing to buy when we were in Italy, was this big fat Bible of Vogue, basically. And because there were so many pages, you had to have some like breakers in between that the photographers edited and added, and it would be, you would barely see anything, but it's obviously all part of the story that they were trying to create. So I feel like everyone's Instagram is more or less now turning into a mood board of their life or the people that they work with, but they do it a little bit more in an artistic way rather than posing just with the product like a QVC channel vibe, and you know. So I think that
it's only brands that consume the grid, like the everyday person who's, you know, following all of ours isn't going to our grid and going, oh, all those images look so pretty together, they're all so color coordinated.
Except me, I do that by everyone's.
Well, I mean, brands do it, and they sort of judge Instagram by that, and I think it needs to be judged. It's by, you know, people don't consume the grid; they consume it in feed, and so they're not seeing that one image connects to another. What so many people are trying to do, and it's back to your point, even about the lookbooks imagery. It doesn't engage. No one likes that lookbook imagery. People want something that they can relate to, or they can aspire to in a way that they actually think they can, you know, that isn't done in like 15 different camera angles. But, you know, I just feel like social media is moving. We are judging creativity by our own standards. But when we think about the consumer and what they're really engaged with, you know, I see it on our feed at Harrods. Like, they love that slightly off-kilter caught moment.
Yeah, it's like social media is meant to connect people. And if a brand takes part on social media, it needs to connect with people as well. And it needs to speak the language of the social platform. So it's that I believe as well that social media for brands needs to be real, like be relatable to the audience, so everyone.
We were talking about this last night. Like, for us on social media, I think the term luxury is very different. I think luxury in the fashion world in real life is perhaps about the texture and the beautiful cashmere and the show and that whole thing. But I think on social media, it's really about the personal story. That is the luxury. And that's why when you show a little bit of personality, when you show that like a personal story or something vulnerable, that's why it does so well on Instagram, because that is luxurious on Instagram, the personal story.
And people get to connect a lot more. And I think that, I mean, a big question also is like, what is the priority for these brands? Is it to get a lot of engagement on Instagram and social media, or is it to get a lot of engagement in real life with, I don't know, the industry or clients and stuff like that? And I think they are sometimes two separate different things, because like, you'll see, for example, like, I'm just like an example for like a musician like Lizzo, who was recently in the cover of Vogue, which is like a huge, big deal. Like, that's amazing. Like a beautiful full-figured woman on the cover of Vogue who's Black, like that's breaking so many boundaries. And she posted the cover on Instagram, and it didn't get as many likes as a photo of her without makeup example. Really? It's like you look at the numbers, and it's like she maybe got like half the amount for something that's such a big moment in her career that you think that her fans would like gag over and like just like go off and be so excited for her. They were more interested to see her without makeup on a regular Instagram photo. And that's interesting to me to compare, because it's the same thing with us. It's like, sometimes we have all these like really amazing opportunities that we're like, we're posting it for us. We're not posting it to get likes, because like we know that it's not gonna like be that engaging for people. It's more of a personal, like, look at this achievement or this project that we did. And that's something to navigate specifically, I guess, for like influencers or brands that are, you know, very heavily engaged with Instagram. It's like kind of negotiating, like, what are you posting for you and what are you posting for the Instagram? Because it's like, sometimes it's two very different things. And I think that that's kind of interesting to ask, like, what is the priority of these brands? If it's Instagram
it's a radical idea. You know, the radical idea that brands might start. I'm not talking about department stores or individual designers. I'm talking about like big super brands. You know, what if they were suddenly to start posting about, I don't know, something that's more emotional, something that people could really connect with? Wouldn't that be interesting?
Mm-hmm.
I connect with that.
I connect with that too.
It would definitely also be something different, and I think we've been all kind of waiting for it. Anyway, guys, this was amazing, and I can't believe we actually talked over an hour now. So unfortunately, as long as I wanted to keep this alive, we have to end our panel discussion. Thank you all so much for tuning in and zooming in, and special thanks to Fecal Matter for getting up very early in Canada. Thank you. Thank you all so much for joining. And I think we are going to call it a day now.